My husband stopped seeing me after 40 years. Then his boss said this. Don't forget to like the video, share your thoughts in the comments, and subscribe to stay updated with our latest stories. My boss confessed his feelings after a gala. What happened next shocked me. I never expected that night to change the way I saw everything, my career, my choices, and especially the man I had worked beside for over a decade. But some moments sneak up on you when you least expect them, unfolding like a perfectly timed symphony, each note striking something deep within you, rearranging the melody of your life in ways you never saw coming. It had started as an ordinary evening. The company's annual gala had just ended, and the city lights shimmered through the wide glass windows of the rooftop venue, casting their golden glow onto the polished floors. The laughter of colleagues still echoed in my ears as I stepped outside, inhaling the cool night air, grateful to be away from the noise and the careful pretense of professional small talk. I leaned against the terrace railing, letting the crisp breeze wash over me. My feet ached in my high heels, elegant, yes, but unforgiving after hours of standing and smiling. I sighed, rolling my shoulders to release the tension, when a familiar voice cut through the night. Leaving already? I turned to see him, Nathaniel Cole. My boss for the past 12 years. A man who commanded every room he entered with a kind of effortless authority that came from experience, wisdom, and an undeniable presence. Silver at his temples, sharply dressed in a tailored tuxedo, he was the epitome of composure. But something in his expression that night felt different, less controlled, more unguarded. I offered a small smile. Just getting some air. That was quite a party. Nathaniel stepped beside me, his hands tucked into his pockets, the crisp lines of his suit softened under the glow of the city lights. It was, but I'll be honest, these events aren't really my thing. I chuckled. Funny, you host them every year. That's just business, he admitted with a slight tilt of his head. You, on the other hand, actually seem to enjoy yourself. I shrugged. I suppose I've learned to play the part. He let out a quiet laugh, warm and knowing, and for a moment, we stood in comfortable silence. The world around us continued to hum, the muffled sounds of traffic below, the distant conversations from inside the venue, but in that small pocket of time, it felt like just the two of us, suspended between the past and the unknown. Then came the words I hadn't expected. I'm not ready to go home yet. His voice was lower, quieter. Would you care to join me for a drink? I hesitated. It wasn't unusual for us to talk outside of work, late-night calls, strategy meetings that stretched into the evening, but this felt different. There was something unspoken in his tone, something that made my pulse quicken just a little. I studied him for a beat, searching for meaning beneath his carefully measured expression. Then, despite the voice in my head warning me to tread carefully, I found myself saying, sure. Why not? We walked together through the quiet streets, away from the brightly lit skyscrapers and into the cozier, older part of downtown where the pace of the city seemed to slow. The sidewalks were damp from an earlier rain, reflecting the neon signs of passing storefronts. Nathaniel led the way to a small, intimate lounge, one I never would have expected him to frequent. The lighting was low, warm, with soft jazz playing in the background, the kind of place that felt like a secret from another time. As we settled into a corner booth, he loosened his tie, a gesture I had rarely seen from him. He exhaled slowly, as if shedding the weight of expectation he always carried. A waiter appeared, and without needing to ask, Nathaniel ordered a bourbon. I hesitated for a moment before settling on a glass of red wine, something smooth to match the slow unraveling of the evening. As the drinks arrived, he lifted his glass slightly in my direction. To another successful gala, he offered. I smiled, clinking mine against his. And to surviving another year at Cole Industries. He chuckled, taking a sip. 12 years. His gaze flickered over me, something contemplative in his expression. That's a long time to work alongside someone. I nodded. It is. A pause stretched between us, filled only by the soft crooning of the singer in the corner. Then, he said something that caught me off guard. Have you ever wondered what life might have looked like if you had taken a different path? I blinked, considering the weight of the question. Are you asking if I regret my choices? He shook his head. Not regret. Just curiosity. Do you ever wonder about the roads not taken? I exhaled slowly, swirling my wine before answering. I think we all do at some point. But I've always believed that every decision, every turn we take, leads us exactly where we're meant to be. His lips curved slightly. That's a wise way of looking at things. We talked then, really talked. Not about work, not about deadlines or quarterly reports, but about life. He told me stories I had never heard before, of his early years, of the struggles of building the company from nothing, of the sacrifices that came with success. And I found myself sharing, too, pieces of my own past, my own quiet ambitions, the dreams I once had before life took me in a different direction. Time blurred. One drink turned into two, then three. Somewhere between the reminiscing and the laughter, the air between us shifted. He reached across the table, fingers grazing the back of my hand, hesitant, searching. I didn't pull away. There was a moment, a suspended breath, where everything hung in the balance. The weight of 12 years, of every interaction, every unspoken moment, all of it was here, now, in the space between our fingertips. Then, in a voice barely above a whisper, he said, "I've never told you this, but I've always admired you. Not just as a colleague. You have this presence, this way of making everything feel steady, even when things are chaos." I felt my breath hitch. I was no stranger to compliments, but this wasn't flattery. This was something deeper. "You've always been the one constant," he continued, his voice steady but filled with something unspoken. And maybe it took me too long to realize just how much that means. The warmth of his touch sent a quiet storm through me. I swallowed, my pulse unsteady. He wasn't just my boss. He was a man I had respected, a man whose opinion I had valued more than I cared to admit. And yet, sitting here, under the dim glow of the bar, I wasn't thinking about work or professionalism. I was thinking about the way he looked at me, as if he were seeing a woman he hadn't allowed himself to truly see before. I pulled my hand away, gently, but not without reluctance. I should probably head home. He studied me for a long moment, then nodded. "Let me walk you." The streets were quieter now, the city settling into its late-night rhythm. As we reached my building, we lingered at the entrance. "Thank you for tonight," he said. "For listening." I smiled, feeling something unnameable settle in my chest. "I could say the same to you." A pause. A hesitation. And then, before I could second-guess myself, I leaned in, just slightly. It was the kind of moment where the past and the future faded, leaving only the now. But before anything else could happen, I pulled back, my breath unsteady. "Good night, Nathaniel," I whispered, stepping inside before I could lose myself completely. As the door closed behind me, I pressed my back against it, heart pounding, because something had shifted between us. And deep down, I knew, this was only the beginning. I hesitated. It wasn't unusual for us to talk outside of work, late-night calls, strategy meetings that stretched into the evening, but this felt different. There was something unspoken in his tone, something that made my pulse quicken just a little. "Sure," I finally said. "Why not?" The moment the words left my lips, I felt a shift in the air between us, something delicate and uncertain, yet undeniably there. Nathaniel's gaze lingered for a second longer than usual, as if confirming something he hadn't dared to put into words. Then, with a small nod, he turned and began walking. I followed. We left behind the grandeur of the rooftop gala, the gleaming city skyline, and the distant echoes of laughter and clinking glasses. The streets were quieter here, lined with old-fashioned lampposts that cast a warm glow over the sidewalk. The cold night air carried the faint scent of rain, mixing with the aroma of street food and the lingering perfume from passing strangers. I stole a glance at Nathaniel. Even in the dim lighting, his presence was striking, sharp suit slightly unbuttoned, silver threading through his dark hair, the confident stride of a man who had spent years mastering the art of control. And yet, tonight, something about him felt different. There was an ease in his posture, a quiet restlessness in his eyes. As we turned a corner, he gestured toward a small lounge nestled between towering office buildings. It was the kind of place I wouldn't have expected him to frequent, intimate, with dark wooden interiors and soft jazz humming in the background. A refuge from the fast-paced corporate world we both lived in. I stepped inside, the warmth of the space immediately wrapping around me. The bartender gave Nathaniel a knowing nod, which told me he had been here before, though likely not often. He led me to a corner booth, a secluded spot where the lighting was low, and the noise of the city felt like a distant murmur. I slid into the seat across from him, feeling a flicker of awareness as he loosened his tie, running a hand through his hair before leaning back against the leather upholstery. It was such a simple movement, yet I had never seen him do it before, not like this, not in front of me. It made him look human. Less like the enigmatic CEO and more like a man who had lived a life full of weight and responsibility. A waiter approached, and without hesitation, Nathaniel ordered a bourbon. He glanced at me. "Whiskey neat," I said. His lips twitched. I should have guessed. The ice clinked against the glass as our drinks arrived, and for a moment, neither of us spoke. The space between us was filled with the quiet hum of conversations, the occasional chime of glasses meeting, and the sultry voice of a singer performing in the background. Then he broke the silence. "You've been with the company a long time," he said, swirling the amber liquid in his glass. 12 years, I nodded. 12 years, he echoed, his voice carrying something unreadable. He exhaled, then looked up, meeting my gaze. "Have you ever wondered what life might have looked like if you'd chosen a different path?" The question caught me off guard. "Are you asking if I regret my choices?" He shook his head. "Not regret, just curiosity. Do you ever wonder about the roads not taken?" I considered his words carefully, feeling the weight of them. I think we all do at some point. But I've always believed that every decision, every turn we take, leads us exactly where we're meant to be. A small smile ghosted his lips. "That's a wise way of looking at things." I like to think so. We talked, really talked, for the first time in years, not about work, not about deadlines or quarterly reports, but about life. He told me about his early years, the struggles of building the company, the sacrifices that came with it. I listened as he spoke about the nights he had spent sleeping in his office, the relationships that had suffered under the weight of his ambition, the dreams that had slowly been replaced by responsibilities. "Success has a way of isolating you," he admitted, his fingers tracing the rim of his glass. "At some point, you wake up and realize that the life you built looks nothing like the life you imagined." I studied him, absorbing the vulnerability in his words. "You've built something remarkable," I said gently. "At a cost," he murmured, his gaze flickering up to meet mine. "And sometimes, I wonder if I was too blind to see what really mattered along the way." There was something about the way he said it that sent a ripple through me, something about the quiet regret in his voice that made my chest tighten. One drink turned into 2, then 3. Time blurred. Somewhere between reminiscing and laughter, the air between us shifted. It was subtle at first, the way his fingers brushed against mine when he reached for his glass, the way his gaze lingered, searching, like he was trying to see something beyond what had always been there. And then, as if drawn by some unseen force, he reached across the table, fingers grazing the back of my hand. The touch was hesitant, searching. I didn't pull away. A quiet breath passed between us. There was a moment, a suspended breath, where everything hung in the balance. Then, softly, he said, "I've never told you this, but I've always admired you beyond just your work. You have this presence, this way of making the world feel grounded, even when everything else is chaos." My heart beat a little faster. I was no stranger to compliments, but this felt different. It wasn't flattery, it was something deeper, something real. "You've always been the one constant," he continued, his voice quieter now, and maybe it took me too long to realize just how much that means. I swallowed, unsure how to respond. He wasn't just my boss, he was a man I had respected for years, a man whose opinion I had valued more than I cared to admit. And yet, sitting there in the warmth of that dimly lit lounge, I wasn't thinking about work or professionalism. I was thinking about the way he looked at me, as if seeing a woman he hadn't allowed himself to truly see before. I could feel the weight of the moment pressing down on us, the line that had always existed between us wavering, threatening to disappear entirely. "I should probably head home," I finally said, though my voice lacked conviction. He studied me for a long moment, then nodded. "Let me walk you." We stepped outside into the night. The city stretched around us, alive with movement and sound, yet in that moment, it felt like we existed in our own world, separate from everything else. The walk was slow, unhurried. Neither of us spoke, but the silence between us wasn't uncomfortable. It was heavy with unspoken words, with things we both felt but weren't ready to say. When we finally reached my building, we stopped at the entrance, standing beneath the glow of the streetlights. Nathaniel exhaled, a faint smile playing at his lips. Tonight was unexpected. I nodded. It was. He hesitated, then reached out, tucking a strand of hair behind my ear with a tenderness that made my breath hitch. "Good night, Evelyn," he said softly. I swallowed, feeling something shift inside me. "Good night, Nathaniel." I turned and walked inside, but even as the elevator doors closed behind me, I knew this night had changed everything. The streets were quieter now, the heartbeat of the city slowing to its late-night rhythm. Neon signs flickered, their glow reflected in the rain-kissed pavement. A distant siren wailed, fading into the night, while the occasional car passed by, its headlights slicing through the darkness. The air was crisp, cool against my skin, carrying the faint scent of rain and something else, something unspoken lingering between us. We walked in near silence, but it wasn't the kind that felt awkward or forced. It was the kind of quiet that carried weight, filled with thoughts too tangled to unravel just yet. Each step felt deliberate, each moment stretching longer than it should, as if the universe itself was conspiring to slow time, to make this night last just a little longer. Nathaniel walked beside me, his hands in his pockets, his expression unreadable. I stole a glance at him beneath the soft glow of the streetlights. His tie was loosened, the sharp angles of his face softened by the hour, by the intimacy of our conversation, by whatever it was we weren't saying aloud. I had spent years seeing him through the lens of work, calculated, composed, always in control. But tonight, there was something else. Something raw. Something vulnerable. The weight of our conversation still lingered in my chest, a quiet ache that I wasn't sure what to do with. "Did you mean what you said back there?" I finally asked, breaking the silence. He turned his head slightly, looking at me. "Which part?" "That you've always admired me. That I've been the one constant." A slow breath. A pause. And then, yes. That one word, spoken with certainty, sent a ripple through me. I nodded, looking straight ahead, my pulse drumming in my ears. We reached the corner of my street, and I realized I wasn't ready for the night to end. I wasn't ready for this moment to dissolve into just another memory. Nathaniel must have felt it too, because he slowed his steps, prolonging the distance between here and the inevitable goodbye. "You don't have to walk me all the way," I murmured. "I know," he said simply. But he didn't turn back. The building loomed ahead, familiar yet foreign in this moment. We stopped at the entrance, the soft hum of the city wrapping around us like a cocoon. The glow of the streetlight cast long shadows, stretching our silhouettes across the sidewalk. Nathaniel exhaled, tilting his head slightly, studying me. "Thank you for tonight," he said, his voice lower now, rougher around the edges. "For listening." I smiled, though my heart felt like it was tumbling in my chest. "I could say the same to you." For a long moment, neither of us moved. There it was again, that delicate, impossible space between us. It stretched, frayed at the edges, begging to be crossed. I could hear the faint hum of my own breathing, feel the electric tension crackling in the air. It was the kind of moment where the world narrows down to two people, where the past and the future fade, leaving only the now. A hesitation. A silent question neither of us dared to voice. Before I could second-guess myself, I leaned in, just slightly. Just enough. Just enough to feel the heat of his breath against my skin, just enough to see the flicker of something dangerous in his gaze, just enough to cross that fragile line. But before anything else could happen, before gravity could pull me closer, I pulled back. My breath was unsteady. My hands curled into fists at my sides, as if grounding myself. Nathaniel didn't move, didn't step forward, didn't try to close the space I had left between us. But he also didn't step away. His eyes searched mine, and in them, I saw 1,000 unspoken things, questions without answers, paths not yet taken. "Good night, Nathaniel," I whispered. I turned and stepped inside before I could lose myself completely. The door closed behind me, sealing me away from him, from whatever had nearly happened. I pressed my back against it, my heart hammering in my chest, my breath shaky. Something had shifted between us. And deep down, I knew this was only the beginning. But sleep didn't come easily. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, replaying the night over and over. The way his voice had softened when he spoke my name. The way his fingers had brushed mine across the table. The way he had looked at me, not as his colleague, not as his employee, but as something else entirely. Something more. My body felt restless, my mind tangled in thoughts I shouldn't be having. Had I imagined it? Had I read too much into the moment? Or had he been about to kiss me too? I squeezed my eyes shut, trying to push the thought away, but it clung to me, refusing to let go. Outside, the city hummed, indifferent to the storm brewing inside me. Somewhere, deep in the pit of my stomach, I knew, I had just crossed a threshold, and there was no turning back. Neither of us had. The next morning, I arrived at the office earlier than usual, hoping the quiet would settle the unease lingering in my chest. But as soon as I stepped off the elevator and into the sleek, glass-walled space, I knew that was wishful thinking. Because Nathaniel was already there. He stood by the window, his back to me, one hand in his pocket, the other holding a cup of coffee. The skyline stretched beyond him, bathed in the soft hues of dawn. For a moment, I hesitated. For the first time in years, I didn't know how to walk into a room with him. I took a slow breath, steeling myself, and stepped forward. He turned at the sound, his gaze meeting mine. Something passed between us. Something wordless, something heavy. Then, with a faint smile, he gestured toward the coffee pot. I made an extra cup. A truce. A silent acknowledgement that the night before had happened. I nodded, stepping toward him, reaching for the coffee. My fingers brushed his ever so slightly, and I felt the echo of last night like a whisper against my skin. He didn't pull away. And neither did I. This was only the beginning. The morning sun crept through the blinds, casting golden streaks across my bedroom walls, but I had been awake long before the light touched the room. My mind was tangled in the events of last night, the weight of Nathaniel's gaze, the quiet intimacy of our conversation, the almost moment between us that had hovered, fragile and electric, before I had pulled away. I turned onto my side, staring at the ceiling as my heart drummed a slow, uncertain rhythm. I had spent 12 years knowing him in one way, Nathaniel Lancaster, my boss, the man at the helm of the company, the one who commanded boardrooms with an unshakable presence. But last night, something had shifted. He wasn't just Nathaniel, the CEO. He was Nathaniel, the man who had let his guard slip, the man who had looked at me like I was something more than just his most trusted colleague. I closed my eyes, trying to shake the memory, but it clung to me like a whisper against my skin. Nothing happened. Nothing could happen. I told myself this as I slid out of bed, my feet meeting the cool floor. I told myself again as I moved through the quiet rituals of my morning, shower, coffee, slipping into my usual polished work attire. But no matter how many times I repeated it, the lingering sensation of last night's tension followed me, threading itself through my thoughts like a song I couldn't forget. By the time I arrived at the office, the usual hum of morning activity was in full swing, phones ringing, keyboards clicking, the distant murmur of conversations. But something felt different. Or maybe I felt different. I moved toward my desk, my pulse kicking up slightly as my gaze drifted toward the corner office. The blinds were partially drawn, but I could still see him. Nathaniel was on a call, leaning slightly against his desk, the morning light casting sharp angles along his jawline. He looked composed, as always, but then, for the briefest moment, he glanced up. Our eyes met through the glass, and I expected nothing more than a passing acknowledgement. A professional nod, maybe. But instead, there was a pause, a hesitation. And then, the smallest of smiles. Barely there. Subtle enough that no one else in the office would have noticed. But I did. And I felt it like a quiet storm beneath my skin. The morning stretched on, but I was hyper-aware of his presence in a way I never had been before. At our usual morning briefing, we sat across from each other in the conference room, surrounded by department heads discussing quarterly reports and projections. I should have been focused on the numbers, the data flashing on the screen. But all I could think about was last night. Nathaniel was poised, as he always was, listening with a quiet intensity that made people hang onto his every word. But there was something else there too, something I noticed only because I knew him too well. The way his fingers tapped lightly against the table when he wasn't speaking. The way his gaze flickered toward me, brief but unmistakable, before he turned his attention back to the discussion. It was nothing but it was also everything. At one point, I reached for my pen, and so did he. Our fingers brushed, a small touch, a mere second of contact. But I felt the heat of it long after. Neither of us acknowledged it. But I knew. He knew. When the meeting adjourned, I gathered my notes, determined to act as if everything was normal. Because it had to be normal. Because the alternative was too dangerous. But as I turned to leave, his voice stopped me. Stay for a moment? It was casual, easy, a request that wouldn't raise suspicion to anyone else in the room. But my heart pounded just a little harder. I nodded. The others filtered out, the door closing behind them. And suddenly, we were alone. Nathaniel leaned against the edge of the table, arms crossed, watching me with an expression I couldn't quite read. How are you? A simple question. Too simple. I swallowed. I'm fine. Why? A flicker of amusement ghosted across his face. You left in a hurry last night. I forced a small laugh, though my fingers curled slightly around my folder. It was late. He studied me for a long moment. It was more than that. I exhaled. Nathaniel. I'm not asking for an explanation, he said, his voice softer now. I just don't want you to feel uncomfortable. About last night. About. He didn't finish the sentence, but I knew what he meant. I shook my head, even as something inside me twisted. I'm not uncomfortable. I think we need to be careful. His jaw tensed slightly, but he nodded. I know. A beat of silence stretched between us. I meant what I said last night, he continued, his voice quieter now, more intent. About admiring you. About you being the one constant. My throat felt tight. Nathaniel. I just needed you to know that. The air between us felt charged again, thick with the things we weren't saying. But finally, he exhaled, running a hand through his hair. The moment shifted. Let's get back to work, he said, pushing off the table. I nodded, feeling an odd mix of relief and something else, something almost like disappointment. Because for a moment, I had wondered what would have happened if I hadn't pulled away. And I had a feeling that thought was going to haunt me for a long time. By the time lunch rolled around, I had nearly convinced myself that everything was fine. Nearly. But when I stepped into the elevator, I wasn't expecting him to follow. The door slid shut, and suddenly, it was just the two of us in the quiet, enclosed space. I stared straight ahead, feeling the tension coil tight again. You're avoiding me, he said after a moment. I let out a short breath, shaking my head. I'm not. You are. I turned to face him. Nathaniel, we worked together. And last night was something neither of us expected, he finished. Silence. The elevator hummed around us, the numbers ticking down. And then. I don't regret it, he said softly. The air seemed to thicken. My pulse skittered. And just as I opened my mouth to respond, the elevator doors slid open. The moment shattered. People streamed in, filling the space, breaking whatever had been lingering between us. Nathaniel stepped back, his mask of composure slipping effortlessly into place. I swallowed hard, gripping my folder a little tighter, and stepped out. Because if I didn't, I wasn't sure what I might say. By the end of the day, I told myself it would fade. That whatever had happened between us last night, whatever this was, it would pass. It had to. But as I gathered my things and walked toward the exit, I caught sight of him again, standing by the window of his office, watching the city lights flicker against the glass. And just before I stepped out, he turned. Our eyes met. And in that second, I knew. This wasn't over. It was only just beginning.